And welcome back. We are episode 4 of the Rambling podcast, where we talk about recovery and the rest. With me, Ellen, and my pal Mandy. Mandy, how are you doing?
Um, I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, I've had quite a busy time. I've had quite a lot of guests. My son had his, oh, we didn't ask about that actually.
Yes.
Yes, we had the bac français yesterday. So both my son and your daughter had their results.
Well, she gets her results tomorrow.
Oh, wow,
Yeah, but we
interesting.
had the brevet results for Eliza this week.
Mm.
Yeah, how did Albert do? How's
Well, I
he
don't
feeling?
know. I don't know whether he wants me to say on air, but
Okay,
he was,
how's he feeling about it?
yeah. He's a little bit disappointed. He thought the oral was going to be a bit higher. I think it's reasonable, good enough, which is what I hope for him, really.
Yeah.
He was quite pleased because my husband actually got exactly the same results. Well, the other way around. So he got the same that Albert got for the oral for his written, and then the same that Albert got for the written for his oral. And my son has neurodiversity, so he has quite a lot of extra educational needs. My husband definitely doesn't. So he was quite pleased that, like, yeah, he was basically like, Papa's a slacker, and I did all right. So yeah, it was okay. It was okay.
Yeah, that's good. It's an interesting thing, actually. It's interesting talking about our theme today is around stress resilience. And as I say, Anais gets her results tomorrow,
Mm,
um, and her sister had her brevet results. So it's kind of the equivalent of the GCSEs, right,
yeah.
in England. And of course, there's kind of this comparison thing going on with the kids of how they did. And I know Anais will kind of not feel very content with how she gets on. But we'd noted that like a lot of the exams is around stress resilience, about our capacity for stress. And it was something I was like, I want her to know that like Eliza did brilliantly. She did really well and deservedly so. She worked really hard for her exams. And Ace had a completely different experience because at the time when she was doing her brevet,
Mm,
we were in the midst of the family splitting up. We just moved, um, and her capacity to deal with those exams just wasn't as great. And it's not a reflection of how clever she is or anything like that. It really was to do with where we were at the time. But it was really good to get Eliza's results and go, ah, for her to be in a stable household,
yeah.
to be able to put that work into brevet and get those results was fantastic. So she is one happy little girl.
Oh, nice. Yeah, and amazing, really. Like your kids are, not bilingual by birth. They've
No,
had two English parents and
yeah,
they're in the French school system. So, anything they do, quite frankly, is incredible.
yeah,
Um, Yeah, it was interesting. I had one of my best mates, we've been friends since we were 8, I think, over at the weekend, and she was talking about the English GCSEs. And I didn't know now that they don't have any continuous assessment, it's all on the exams, which is
oh wow,
just unbelievable.
yeah,
It's just such a like weird
seems
backward step
so
of
unfair. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
hugely unfair because again, if you are, have anxiety or you have or just that one thing doesn't work for you,
yeah,
or you have like extra educational needs, like my son, he so far with his kind of average, over the year because of his continuous assessment, he's averaging about a 12, which is,
yeah,
great. Like he needs a 10 to pass, and
yeah,
we just want him to pass. But yeah, if it was just on the exams, it
yeah.
would be because then it depends on what subject you get, it's yeah. So I
The
really
whole
feel for the
host,
kids. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, a whole host of variables in whether you show up your best self on that one day.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, absolutely. Other than Albert's results and your guests.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about stress resilience today, and I so it's I work at Latitude. I have done for the last 4 years. This will be year four.
Mhm.
And I was saying just before we started that I've noticed this morning, which is a great sign because it means I'm much more in touch. Much less disassociated and much more in touch with myself, that I can sense that I've got some underlying anxiety. Um, I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I think it was, gosh, when was it now? It was probably like January 2024, around that time, after having years of kind of tests on thyroid, well, just so many tests, so many blood tests, iron, all of those stuff. And it's much, much better now. Like, I changed my antidepressant, which is better for kind of pain management, which was terrifying. I mean,
Yeah,
you really helped me through that. I can remember messaging you going, my brain is was really mad for a
yeah,
couple of days, which, yeah, um, makes me think of, just how serious that is. And I know, like, it can really be a trigger to go back to drinking coming off medication. Um, but anyway, so like, it's been a real kind of, I think it must be longer than that, but it's been a real learning curve around managing my capacity. And it's I when I get it right, it's a real kind of dopamine boost, because I am starting to get quite skillful in understanding, right? Like last time, for example, I went to London. I stayed with my brother, stayed with a friend, then went out of London to stay with another friend. And then the 2 days at the end, I stayed in a hotel on my own, just to regulate and like sleep and just be on my own. Um, and I came back and I wasn't completely broken, which is very different to kind of trips that I've done in the past where I've been to Paris. Or, I mean, I remember when we were doing some training together, you were like helping me to learn about strength training, and I just was utterly broken, coming back and not sleeping well. But yeah, it's definitely, I've got some anxiety around, because it's all about impact and, you know, planning basically. So it's
yeah.
like, I don't want my life to not do the things that I want to do.
Yeah,
Um, but sleeping in a tent at a festival is incredibly high impact.
yeah,
Um, So yeah, I mean, I have, but like, I'm incredibly privileged in the sense that I work for myself and I'm not like the main earner in my income, in my household. So I can, like, I've taken the week off work. I mean, I don't get paid when I take the week off work, um, but I have taken the week off. But yeah, there's definitely a bit of me of like, oh, okay, like, trying to plot it out in my head of what this is gonna look like. And um, so yeah, that's kind of
yeah.
in my mind at the moment.
A lot of that is about being proactive rather than reactive to a crisis, right? It's like
100%.
I know that if I plan it this way, that I am aware that I have capacity for this. I always go back to this cup thing. Like, I am this cup, I have capacity for a certain amount of stuff, and I still need capacity for emergency stuff, right? Because we don't
Yeah.
know what's around the corner.
Yeah.
So it's okay running on full all the time as long as nothing else happens, because when that overspills, it comes out in, as you said, like dysfunction, whether that's a trigger back to drinking, or I don't know, anger issues, or it can be anything, can't it?
Yeah.
Dysfunction,
Yeah.
stress,
I mean,
disease.
I was sorry, I was just interrupted, but I was in a meeting yesterday, and I go to a meeting with quite a lot of old timers that have got, 20 plus years sobriety. And there was this guy who, 23 years, and he used the language relapse. I know not everyone likes that language, um, because of some, health. news that he had. And again, you're just so right. It's so important that as much as we put down those unhelpful strategies for living and, we stabilize, you have to have you have to kind of do the daily work of taking care of yourself to have enough capacity to cope when stuff comes out of nowhere, because you're it's never going to not be something that your brain is automatically going to go to
Yeah,
in extreme stress.
yeah,
Just
absolutely.
that's by neurobiology. It's beyond something you can think your way out of, right? It's
Well, and of course, autoimmune diseases like fibromyalgia, they are, in middle-aged women in particular, the statistics are enormous, and a lot of that is to do with our capacity of everything that has happened in our lifetime, because that cup, right, is constantly being filled or emptied, and sometimes it's just filled, 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 and it comes out in disease, especially fibromyalgia and well, especially autoimmune in women,
yeah.
high blood pressure, high resting heart rate, heart disease in lots of people. It's so it's extremely important kind of topic around this stress resilience, around managing our stress, especially in sobriety. As you say, it is so often a trigger of alcohol is always really attractive when it offers us something, it fulfills a need. And so often that need is just to numb out and to escape our brain for a while.
Yeah, and it mimics GABA, doesn't it, in the
Yeah.
brain? So GABA is that anti-anxiety kind of neurochemical, and that's why drinking is so problematic for as a tool for stress, because in in the beginning it works perfectly,
Yes.
but the brain is always seeking equilibrium. So as it mimics GABA, then the brain thinks, right, I'm not going to create more GABA because I've got this, synthetic um, product doing the job. So it reduces the GABA, output. And then that's where that anxiety comes in, that anxiety after drinking, because you have a reduction of GABA. And that's where that really problematic cycle comes. So the stress alcohol compensation is so, so important. Yeah, I mean, when I told my trauma therapist that I had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, she was just like, yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's trauma. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh.
It's stored in the body. It's yeah.
Yay me, woohoo.
Yeah.
I'm like a poster child. Um, so before we get into more stress resilient stuff, how are you? Um,
I'm good. Is it, I asked my group this, and then and everyone's like, yeah, I'm okay. And then I always ask them to like, okay, if you could pin like top three feelings around that, can you explore a little further? So it's always interesting, isn't it? That yeah, I'm good. Um, I'm okay. I'm just getting into the summer holidays. Um, so prioritizing rest as I have been, movement, nutrition. But yeah, no, I'm navigating this freaking dating as well, new relationships, alcohol free. We just chatted a little bit um, before the podcast about doing that alcohol free is just such a different thing, and doing it in your 40s is such a different thing. We've moved on. I'm not looking to have children or nest with anybody, and I've never been here and really done this before. And it's when you are very aware of everything that's going on, and I'm very aware of my thoughts and my feelings around things, navigate and all the kind of the complex trauma that's come along with everything that's happened. It's an interesting journey for sure.
well, yeah, I think you're very brave. It's a brave um, time for you, right? I mean, and bravery ties in with resilience, right? Because you can't be brave if you don't have resilience.
It's
And in
interesting, isn't it?
go on.
Because, sorry, I used to hate that word
I was
resilience.
just about to say, so
Oh,
let's start with tell me how you feel about this word.
I freaking hate it. No, I don't anymore. And again, I know that my drinking, like my habits, my language is always quite extreme too. Um, But I remember on the first Bali retreat, actually, somebody really, saying, "Gosh, you're so resilient, you're so strong," and me having such resentment for the word. Like, I don't want to be resilient. I don't want to be strong because for me, the connotation is that you can keep on getting knocked down and you can keep on getting back up. And people or life will continue to knock you down and get back up and people would say to me as well about the kids, like, oh, but kids are strong and you've made them so resilient now. And I'm like, I don't want that for my kids. I want them to be protected and never to have hard times. But actually now we're kind of through it. I think thank goodness for resilience. It does shape us. Like, I think when we've talked before about the trauma that you've been through and that where you've landed now, it's
Mm.
like, okay, it's the resilience, the ability to get through that, the ability to do the work that you need to now get to a point where you're able to help other people is it shapes us, it shapes our personality, it shapes who we are, it shapes what our sense of purpose. So I have more compassion for the word.
Yeah.
Um, I have more love for the word. Thank goodness I'm resilient because it could have looked very different otherwise when things were very, very difficult. Um,
Yeah, it is it's a very divisive word, and I think especially people that have had trauma, I think it can be particularly spiky. I mean, I know I've talked to a few people like, Johnny Lawrence, who's a good friend of mine and he was just like, I can't stand that word. And it's like, yeah, I totally get it. I can remember, when I first went into kind of when I was under psychiatric care for a little bit when my sleep was so bad and I had this kind of OCD habit of having to get up basically every time I was just falling asleep, I would bolt right awake again, and have to go and check all the locks in the house. And it got into this thing that I just would consistently do for like, 4 or 5 hours. Um, when we first moved to this idyllic, beautiful place near the sea, um, and yeah, and I was kind of under the local psychiatric care, and I was having a lot of different interventions with different people. And someone said, and that was kind of when they first named that I had complex PTSD. And I was like, oh. Um, and they said, you're incredibly resilient. And I was like, I don't want to be resilient. I
yeah.
want someone to take care of me. Like, it's the opposite of what you want to hear. Um, and then I did a kind of deep dive around the kind of French model of resilience, and the work of Boris Cyrulnik, who's like a French psychotherapist. And he wrote a book called Resilience, which I absolutely love. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Um, and I understood it from, yeah, a different kind of um, perspective. Um, so what does stress resilience mean?
So stress resilience really is about this capacity, thinking of ourselves as a vessel. Stress in itself kind of gets a bad rap. And it doesn't need to. Stress is a good thing, right? Um, and everything is stressful. Getting up out of bed in the mornings is stressful. Going to do our teeth adds a little bit of stress. Getting the kids ready in the morning is stressful. Going on holiday is stressful. Going to a yoga class adds stress to the body. Stress in itself is not a bad thing. Um, but what we're looking, if I always go back to this because I'm a personal trainer, it's if we think of muscles with stress, if we never train our muscle never grows, right? If we train it just enough where it's just out of its comfort zone, and then we let it rest and recover, we grow the muscle. And that's called eustress. That's that sweet spot of stress. If we overtrain a muscle, we distress it and we risk injury, uh, and we can't recover from. So it's the same with stress resilience. We are looking for that sweet spot of stress where we are continuing to grow, we're continuing to thrive. We aren't in a kind of a plateau where we're depressed. We don't want to get out of bed because that doesn't do anything for us. We want enough stress, yeah, that we have this sense of purpose, but we don't want too much stress that leads us to distress, dysfunction, disease.
Oh,
So
I love that as an analogy. Yeah.
a lot of it is about how do we manage our stress with regards to we can do things. Distress tends to put our nervous system right into fight or flight, fawn or
Mm.
flight. And we're looking to be in rest and digest as much as possible. So we're looking to keep on emptying our cup so that we have the capacity for more stress
Mm.
as life throws it at us.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, my mind went to that place of, that freeze state if you are not, um, you know, uh, kind of don't have the capacity to put any stress into your body, essentially. Um, and what we understand about kind of trauma, sort of the triggers, or what happens is you go into that adrenaline kind of cortisol high,
Yeah,
fight flight, action. And if that gets depleted and that gets exhausted, then you go into that kind of freeze depletion, which certainly I think both of us have had in the last couple of years,
yeah,
right? Like I think my brain is only now really coming back online. Like I have creative thoughts, and I mean, we're doing this. Like I could not have done this a year ago. I just did. I didn't have the capacity to have any thoughts about anything other than like put one foot in front of the other and um, do as little stress as possible.
yeah,
Um, what I found really hard um, is to understand the difference between kind of healthy rest and being in that freeze state. Because as you said, when you were describing the muscles, it's like you put the muscle into that, stress state or whatever in order for it to grow, and then it needs to rest. So rest is hugely, hugely important. However, like sometimes it's very difficult to know the difference of like, am I kind of in freeze state and just not doing anything, or am
yeah.
I like in that healthy rest state?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is about am I still getting joy out of certain things, right? Like if I rest is most important. It's interesting. So I am a personal trainer, but I had a personal trainer a few years ago during COVID and learning the kettlebells. And the way that he does his training is mostly around rest. It's not about the resistance. It's not about the amount of work you do. So it's this idea that we can only work well when we rest well. So for me, it was a killer. Like we have this idea, and again, I'm going to use the gym, but this is life too. We have the idea that we should be going as fast as we can, as hard as we can to get the best results. Whereas actually that only ever leads to burnout. And the rest part of our exercise means that we can continue to exercise. It was a whole new way of training for me.
Mm,
Um, and I hated it to start off with. I was like, you want me to stand here for a minute and do nothing? And he's like, yes, because I can get you to do 300 squats if I get you to rest enough in between. But I can
mm,
only get you to do 30 if you just exercise in one go. So it's the same with life. Like, okay, to certain things light me up? Do I still want to do those things? And then have I rested enough in between to have capacity to do them again? But I know it is really difficult to know, is this kind of a state of depression
mm.
or is it healthy rest?
Yeah, I think what you touched on there is really key. So when we're looking at that rest and restore space, you know, it's about connection, right? It's about joyful connection. So if I'm doing good rest, I'm having a lovely bath where I'm like, oh, I'm in the water and I've got essential oils and I can see the candles and I'm feeling it and I'm really connected to that experience. Like if I'm watching a film and I'm snuggled under the blankets, I've got a lovely cup of tea and I feel really like in it.
Yeah.
That is that kind of rest and restore, because it's about what we understand about kind of regulating the nervous system is it's through connection. So the difference from that is if I'm like, and there's no shame around that, right? I do this all the time because I don't have the capacity to, I have had so much burnout in my life that quite often I am in freeze state, and that's all I'm capable of.
Yeah.
It's just awareness around that. That would be me in, kind of half watching the TV, scrolling on my phone, not really getting any pleasure out of any of it, like just existing
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
Um, and that's been my kind of learning around it. It's like, do I have, when I rest, like for example, rest doesn't necessarily mean inaction, right?
No, rest can look like lots of different things, right?
Yeah. So when I was describing that kind of my trip to the UK recently when I went to London, that last kind of couple of days of my rest period after lots of kind of, I had a big meeting that was really important. I had a lot of anxiety before that actually, which was really surprising. I sat with my husband and I was like really like, had increased heart rate and all of that sort of stuff. And he was like, wow, like what's going on for you? And I'm just like, I'm just really anxious. Welcome to the perimenopause. I don't know. So I sat and did some breathing and everything. But yeah, those last 2 days, for me, it's almost like I needed to not be with not be in an active role with other people, so not having to chat with people, having to entertain, having to perform, having to but being in the world as like as a silent participant. I find that really calming. So I went to the Tate Modern and I just walked around the gallery, and there's something about that my nervous system just loves it. And then I went and sat on the South Bank and just, read my book. And then I went and had a nice cup of tea and a piece of cake.
Yes, and
Um,
that's a really important thing for people to recognize, right? The regulation, because we can be, as you said, we can be sat on the sofa, we can be uh, laid in bed, but when our cortisol levels are too high, we are not in rest or digest. Our nervous system is still in fight and flight. We go back to basically what the body is made for. We are constantly looking for threats even though we might be sat on the sofa, even though logically we know there's no threats. So it is that reaching for what regulates me, who regulates me, how do I regulate myself, and getting more of that. That's rest. For me, like going to the mountains over the weekend, like it wasn't physical rest, it was psychological rest of coming out of my household for 2 days, not being mum to anybody. It like we did a load of walking, we slept in a van, like it's not the typical rest. It doesn't mean sleep, it just means taking a break and regulating yourself.
mm. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a real connection, isn't there, with being outside? It's being connected with something bigger than you, I suppose, the sort of internal neurosis of your own
Mm.
suffering, I suppose. Yeah.
It's quite an interesting thing. This is the other thing with stress, right? Because people quite often struggle with the idea that psychological stress and physiological stress and environmental stress
Mm,
act us. And it's like I think there's probably more an idea that stress is a psychological thing or one or the other, and that they don't have an impact. But actually, it's we know that psychological stress impacts our body. It impacts our resting heart rate. It impacts our blood pressure. And an easy way to describe that is to think of somebody that has a fear of flying.
Mm.
It isn't actually anything that is going on. It's not a direct uh, kind of correlation between I'm in a plane that's crashing and therefore I'm in this fight or flight response. It is the idea that my plane will crash is enough for me, for my resting heart rate to go up, for my blood pressure to go up, for me, for my cortisol levels to go up. Just talking about something that makes me anxious is enough to have that physiological uh, impact. So very much the stress resilience is a three-tiered thing. It's our environment, it's our psychological, and it's our physiological. So yeah, can I get myself into an art gallery?
Yeah.
Can I make sure that I'm not talking to people who kind of drain me, or can I make sure I'm connecting with people who really lift me up? And can I either literally rest or can I go for a walk? What do I have capacity for? So it's those three things all working together.
Yeah, and that's what I find so interesting about. I mean, this is why kind of I think the work both that we do with, as coaches with clients and the work that we do with ourselves, why actually once you get into it, if it becomes incredibly empowering, is because essentially it's about hacking your own nervous system. So it is actually very practical, and I think I have quite a practical brain. So it's like, once you understand that not only, so you've got all these, as you say, the external and internal stressors, those
Yeah.
are the things feeding into your kind of bucket or your cup. So like, yeah, noise, smells, like heat, all of those things, pressure from work, stress with the kids, and then, all of the like physical ailments or whatever. That's all the stuff coming in. And then you've got the actual capacity, the size of your cup,
Yeah.
and that cup is constantly getting bigger and smaller. So if you have a history of complex PTSD or trauma or stress or chronic stress, whatever you want to call it, you're or you're hypersensitive or you're neurodiverse, your cup is essentially going to be smaller anyway.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like, right, knowing that, knowing how big my cup is, asking that question, what capacity have I got right now? And that can change all the time. And I hear this with clients. It's like, I don't understand because, I was doing really well 3 months ago. Everything was like, I was, coping with everything. And
Yes.
now, I picked up a drink and I don't know what happened. And when
And
you're,
it was a one-time thing, right? It
yeah,
was just a bucket decision. And it's
yeah.
actually when we can look back what was leading up to that.
Exactly. So you peel back all the layers and it's like, oh, well, there was that situation with my
And it
elderly
was fine,
parent. And
and
yeah,
I coped, and it's not a
yeah,
big deal. And it's like, well, if you're not draining your cup, the only options we have are to stop putting things in our cup that stress us, and to drain our cup, which is to sleep well is a massive, that's the ultimate rest, right? That is when our cortisol levels are lowered, and if we do not sleep well, those level, and this is where alcohol comes into it. Alcohol is the devil when it comes to stress resilience because primarily it impacts our sleep, right? And our
yeah,
sleep is the most important tool we have in lowering our stress levels. Um, if you're awake at 2 or 3 in the morning with your head like thoughts everywhere, that's a sign that there is probably something to be looked at with regards to how you are managing your stress. Um,
yeah. And I think that's such a kind of, as you say, alcohol's the devil because, I can say from my own experience with alcohol, um, it was it was a sleep drug for
yeah.
me, right? And I know that with other people within my, close knit family and friends, that there becomes this, and with clients, there becomes this like really fearful kind of um, stage of like knowing that alcohol isn't showing up well in your life and wanting to make a change. but that fear of not being able to sleep because it's become that thing that knocks you out at the end of the day, or has become that. But then at the same time, knowing that you're waking up at 4 in the morning, sweating, regretting, and all of those things, it's very, very hard to tackle that. And I don't know whether I talked about this last time when I was talking about my story, but sleep has been a huge, huge issue for me throughout my life. Um, and I'm thankfully, with the help of a hypnotherapist, have made incredible progress
Yeah.
recently. And that's why my brain is working again and I
Yeah.
can do this podcast and all of the other things. But, when I decided that I needed to stop drinking, it was such a fear around my sleep that um, my first kind of thought process through it was like, okay, I might not sleep much, but at least it's quality sleep. So that
And
kind of got me through,
yeah.
at the beginning. It was like, okay, I might not sleep much, but at least it will be quality sleep. Um, However, that was sustainable for, kind of short period of time, but all the reasons why I didn't sleep were still there, all the trauma, all of the multiple reasons really that I had a phobia around sleep, um, that I started taking sleeping tablets, and that was something that I had to eventually get in recovery from. So,
Yeah.
when you look at through my sobriety, it was like I might have been sober from alcohol, but there was a period in my first 4 years, I'd say, of sobriety, probably between yeah, 2 and 4, maybe two, where I developed a really not, I wouldn't say an addiction because I was very, very like I knew I was worried about them anyway because I knew that they were highly addictive. So my husband always had them. So I put barriers in my way that I had to ask him before I had one. I would only have them when I was traveling. There were rules around them, but I got to a point where I was looking forward to traveling because I knew I could have one.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to certain things because I knew that I would be allowed to have one. And in the end I had to just and I cried. I had to just be like, I cannot ever take these again. And I took them. I asked my husband where they were, took all the boxes, threw them in the bin. I have a sobriety date on my calendar, like it was a proper, and I sobbed because it was like, yet again, I sort of vulnerably, nakedly have to walk through the world, and try and cope. And then it was like melatonin, antihistamines, like there's all, because the all the kind of roots of it were never, dealt with. And it's, as you say, it's such a difficult thing because you can't survive without sleep.
No.
um
And it's interesting as to whether we can reframe it. The thing that I find really interesting is, so for me, when I gave up alcohol, actually sober sleep was one of the driving factors in keeping me alcohol free because I
mm,
suddenly realized that resting well, really, really having good sleep, and my sleep improved very, very quickly, actually. And I love sleeping. So when I realized I had never really correlated the alcohol to the fact that I wasn't sleeping well. I, like many people, because it is true, we also need to recognize that the alcohol is a depressant, so it does slow the brain down, so it does help us fall asleep. But what it doesn't do is help us stay asleep.
yeah,
And but I didn't know enough to realize that alcohol was having that impact on my sleep. So when I removed it and I had fantastic sleep after a month, the impact of that fantastic sleep meant that my relationships with my kids and my family members completely changed because I wasn't really grumpy. Like lack of sleep affected my mood, it affected my brain fog. So I was suddenly more motivated. I suddenly had a much clearer mind. I had more energy. I wasn't craving carbohydrate, like carbs in the morning to get me through. My energy levels were much more even. So I realized just the impact of remove the alcohol, have better sleep, and it has this butterfly effect.
Yeah.
The interesting thing for me now is I know that if I wake during the night, I literally will say to myself, "Oh, that's interesting. What's
Mm,
me. I see it as feedback of something's not sitting well with me. I've obviously there is some kind of stress that I'm not working through. So I need to speak to somebody or maybe need to reflect on what is going on and redirect like, okay, something's not right. What adjustments can I make to ensure that I protect my sleep, I protect my rest?
yeah.
There's lots of things, and I'm sure we'll go on in the episodes to talk about how to improve our sleep. Um,
Yeah, and thinking through that, I just looked on my app. I'm 1 year, 11 months, and 12 days free of sleeping pills. Yeah, yeah,
that's it.
me.
Yeah.
Um, and I think part of that recovery has also been all the other stuff that I've been doing, right? Like that I will not take away from the hypnotherapy because it has been absolutely transformative. Because I don't think I ever spent any time really thinking about why I did all, all the reasons why I didn't sleep. I don't think I would have got to the point of being able to reach out to that person or understanding that that was something that maybe would help had I not have done, you know, all the other things like stripping back on work. And so everything is connected. It's
It's
all, yeah, kind of a big wheel of turning, and that's why I think there's a lot of compassion of rather than when things happen, it's looking at the overall, right? It's just like, okay, I didn't manage that meeting with that person, or I got triggered in that situation. But it's like when I look at the whole overall picture of all of the things that I keep doing, it's like I'm on the right path, and
yeah.
and it's getting better.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's that synergy. They all work together. They can't work in isolation. That's why the idea that sobriety is simply removing alcohol,
mm,
that's just the beginning of it. Everything else has to start shifting. And it does. It shifts. Some shift quickly, some shift a lot slower, but they do all kind of link into place and start to align really well. And we're only ever looking for being okay and everything, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm definitely not looking for perfectionism. I was just talking about why I actually prefer doing the podcast live than recording them. And I'm like, because my need for perfectionism used to keep me so stuck. And
Mm,
so I would record and edit and edit and edit, whereas actually being done and being okay is enough.
good enough. Yeah.
Good enough.
On that note, I think we should probably wrap up because
Yeah,
we've promised
absolutely.
not to do too
Not
long on these.
rambling.
Yeah, on our ramblings, which are not wanderings. I apologize. I might get that right at some point. I think I've called it the wrong name about 4 times since we started. Not
Wandering,
today, but like,
rambling. Yeah, it's all
yeah.
the same.
It is all the same. Waffling, we could call it.
Yeah.
I'll stop talking now. Um, thank you very much.
No worries. And if anybody needs any help with, well, on their sobriety journey or in on their journey with stress resilience, because it is massively linked to ongoing long-term sobriety, then you can reach out to either Mandy or myself.
Yeah, and we will be back soon for more conversations on recovery and the rest.
Yeah.